and we're actually live streaming it on one of my Chinese partners. We're going to take the live stream and actually break the firewall and put it into the People's Republic of China so that they can see the speech tonight, which we try to do every time we speak to reinforce the virtues of free speech. Let's go back in time for a second. It is 5 o'clock in the evening on November 8th of 2016. That's when the mainstream media companies get the first exit polls. This is Donald Trump's 2016 election. The exit polls had us, I think, even in Ohio and Iowa, and losing everywhere else. And I was the guy that told candidate Trump 88 days before, when I stepped in and took over the campaign, that if you stuck to the populist nationalist program, if you focused on illegal immigration, mass illegal immigration to get our sovereignty back and protect our workers, our low-skilled workers, if you focused on legal immigration to protect our tech workers, if you focused on bringing jobs back from China, and if you focused on getting us out of these pointless foreign wars in the Middle East, those three legs of the stool, and you compare and contrast her, Hillary Clinton, for the corrupt and incompetent guardian of the globalist party at Davos. I don't care if you're 10 points behind or 12 points behind or 14 points behind and we have no money and she has $1 billion. It doesn't matter. That message will resonate with working class people and middle class people, and you will win. You will be the President of the United States. I said, forget all the polls. There's only two numbers that matter. Number one, 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 of the American people still thought we were on the wrong track. Right track, wrong track. They admired President Obama and his wife, but they did not think he was an agent of change that the country needed. But more importantly, the most important number was Pat Caddell, who just died a couple of weeks ago, who was the pollster for Jimmy Carter. Pat Caddell had been doing polling for 40 years, and for the first time in American history, working class people and middle class people believed America was in decline, and that our elites, our financial, our corporate, our cultural elites were comfortable with that. And that managed decline to unsuccessful outcomes to its citizen was the number one issue. And that America would back someone who came in and said, we will return America to her former glory. That's what the last 88 days were. On Billy Bush weekend, when everybody wanted him to quit, I said, double down. People don't care about the locker room talk. What they care about is their country, their kids, their grandchildren, their communities, their jobs. We're going to double down. We're going to triple down. So at 5 o'clock in the evening, on November 8th, I wasn't looking so good. We called, actually, the candidate. He took it very well. He said, look, we left everything on the field. We could not have done anything else. Then as the evening progressed, 7 o'clock, polls started coming in, real votes. Things looked a little different in Florida, a little different in Ohio. But at 8 o'clock, the Detroit Free Press, one of the most respected newspapers in the country, been around for 150 years, declared that Michigan had gone for Hillary Clinton. They had never been wrong in their entire, I think, 150 years. I'd had us win in Michigan. So I knew we had a problem. But as the night progressed, we won Florida, we won Ohio, we won North Carolina. You could see in the counties coming in, particularly the counties we had focused on, of working class Democrats, low propensity voters, people that thought that the system had left them behind, started to come in, and we could see some momentum. We could see that we were very close in Wisconsin. We thought we were going to win Pennsylvania. But as it got to around midnight, the Detroit Free Press reversed and said it was too close to call. That's when I told Donald Trump he was going to be the next president of the United States. A couple hours later, AP, Associated Press, called it. They kind of waited to 2:30 in the morning, so we wouldn't exactly address the nation in prime time. The fuse, by the way, the Detroit Free Press did not call the campaign for Donald Trump until, I think, November 25th, when we got the rest of the votes. The lesson is that even people that voted for Donald Trump were afraid to tell anybody. And the algorithms that the hinterland and the small villages and the outer suburbs and the small towns had come out in record numbers. The algorithms that for the big cities, the big cities coming first and then it triggers for the rest, it was wrong. The algorithm was wrong and people would not admit they voted for Trump. Why? Because of the demonization of the deplorables, right? What's a deplorable? Deplorable's a citizen, okay? Deplorable's a citizen. I go all over the world. I just got back from Japan. I went up in the island Hokkaido. There are deplorables there, right? There's deplorables in Arizona. There's deplorables in Ohio. There's deplorables in Switzerland, and Italy, and Germany, and France, and here in Norway. They're the little guy. It's the family I come from. My grandfather's a lineman for the phone company for 50 years. My father's a lineman for the phone company for 50 years. We're the most average family in the world. Just average working class people. The bomb that went off on November 8th, because remember when the polls came in, the mainstream media is high-fiving. They're getting ready for night. They were laughing it up. They couldn't believe it. Megyn Kelly's putting on her makeup. Not just is Donald Trump going to be humiliated because it looked like a 400-point electoral victory. Hillary's drinking champagne up there in the Peninsula Hotel. They've got that huge thing they had coming out, jutting out, that convention hall. They had 10,000 people. We had a cash bar for the VIPs. Nothing, right? I mean, nothing. We didn't have a victory speech. We kind of made it up on the spot. We knew we were going to win, but we didn't want to jinx ourselves. The fuse was lit 8 years before. September, I think it's 17th or 18th, 2008, Oval Office. Head of the Federal Reserve, Secretary of the Treasury from Goldman Sachs, Hank Paulson, guy I used to work for. They walk in the Oval Office. Lehman Brothers had gone bankrupt in London on Monday morning, right? In a chain of events, smartest guys in the room didn't realize by letting Lehman go in bankruptcy, the whole system is going to collapse. They walk in and tell Bush, if we don't have $1 trillion by 5 o'clock, the American financial system is going to implode in 48 hours, the world financial system in 72 hours, and you will have global anarchy and chaos in 2 weeks. So President Bush, in a real profiling courage, said, it's not my job. You've got to go to Capitol Hill. They're the only ones who can authorize that. The balance sheet of the Federal Reserve at that moment was $880 billion. The balance sheet of the Federal Reserve when Donald Trump raised his hand on January 20th of 2017 was $4.5 trillion. The ECB, the Bank of England, the Bank of Tokyo, the Federal Reserve, all the central banks came up with a solution. We're going to bail out the wealthy. And we're going to bail it out on the shoulders of the common man. Remember, Obama's the most progressive president in American history. Because when you flood the zone with liquidity, you can bail out the big real estate holders, you can bail out the hedge funds, you can bail out the banks, you can bail out the investor class, you can bail out the donors. But there's a corollary to that. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Negative interest rates means a savings account has zero. A checking account has zero. That means if you're just some schmuck that has a job, right, and your little bit of money you're going to put away to save, you're a fool, because the system is not going to reward you. They're going to essentially, that's a tax. Also, you can't do a public bond offering. You can't do a public bond offering to fix the roofs of a school in the United States because there's not enough juice. They're only at 1%, 1.5%. Nobody will buy them. The pension gap. We have a $9.5 trillion pension gap for working class people in the United States because of this. They never want to talk about that. They never want to talk about how they panicked. They didn't know how to handle deflation. The very people that had caused it, bailed themselves out at taxholders' expense, at the common man's expense. And they broke, 2,500, 3,000, 5,000 years of the underpinnings of the Judeo-Christian West, that the householder, the backbone of civic society, the family, you work hard, you save, you put a little bit away, you eventually can buy a house. It's generated, this is why people under 30, 75% of them want socialism or think socialism's cool, because they're nothing but Russian serfs in the 18th and 17th century. They don't own anything. They're not going to own anything. They're 30% behind where their parents are at the same time in life on income, family formation. Why we have a problem? Why we have a demographic problem? Why we have a family formation and people having kids? Every poll says the same thing, whether it's in the United States, Europe, or economic anxiety. You can't plan for your future. Uber just went public for $90 billion today? Was it today or yesterday, $90 billion? The gig economy personified, right? No pension, no stability, one gig to the next. That's globalization. That's the logical conclusion of globalization. The fuse was lit there. This populist revolt, the Tea Party, Brexit, all of it started with a financial crisis, and a financial crisis that we've kicked the can down the road. Yesterday, in a court in New York City, a young woman posing as a German heiress, she's a scam artist. She lived in these posh hotels and ran up a bill, and I think it was $200,000. She got 4 to 12 years in prison. What did the investment bankers get? What did the lawyers get? What did the accountants get? What did everybody associated with the financial collapse get? There were studies and reports and all the stuff that was done. There were 250 criminal referrals to the Justice Department. I think they got some real estate appraisers, some people in Miami and Las Vegas making $60,000 a year. I think they went to prison because they appraised working class people's houses for too much. By the way, the working class got blamed too, particularly the African Americans. Oh, we shouldn't have had them buy these houses. They're the ones at fault. Not the ones who created the economic weapons of mass destruction that went off. Did you see those guys? Did Goldman Sachs return any fees? Did Goldman Sachs' partners return any of their bonuses? Did Goldman Sachs' partners give up any equity? No, you know what Goldman Sachs did? To save Goldman Sachs, on that Monday, the following Monday, they let him go in and sign a one-line piece of paper and made him a bank holding company so they can borrow for 0 or less and lend it to their own clients for a couple of hundred basis points. So every year, just by cutting on the lights, they generate a couple of $1 billion in cash. Now, why do I go through this? Because that's the system that's been created. This system has destroyed working class and middle class people throughout the world and left them angry and full of angst. People say all the time, Bannon, why are you so angry? Why are these deplorables so angry? I said, because they're rational human beings, right? Right? Because it's also your pension funds and your savings and your retirement that's funding this. You know, Zuckerberg didn't have any money. That's pension fund money. All these high and mighty guys in Silicon Valley and all these hedge fund guys and these masters of the universe, not their money. It's your money. In the United States, that's where you go to Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Minnesota. You don't have to have some long, complicated dissertation like you do on Wall Street to get these people to understand about China. They understand where the factories went. J.D. Vance, the Marine Corps captain from Yale, the great sociologist of the Trump deplorables, wrote that book, Hillbilly Elegies. If you haven't read it, you ought to read it. He points to two studies done at MIT and Harvard. Those studies showed there's a direct correlation between the factories that went to China, the jobs that went with them, and the opioid crisis. Tariffs are not about tax. Tariffs are about human dignity, self-determination. It's about bringing manufacturing jobs back to the industrial democracies of the West, to move the supply chain back to Japan and North America and Europe. They had the same surprise on Brexit. Remember, we had Breitbart London. Nigel, God bless him, running the Brexit Party Day. Remember, on the evening of Brexit, Nigel conceded at 10 o'clock. I had to call him. I said, Nigel, no more beers, right? We got this. We're going to win this. I said, it's those Midland counties. I said, watch these Labour voters. It was Labour voters that voted for Brexit that put it over the top. Just like it's Democrats, Reagan Democrats, and working class Democrats that put Trump over the top. We won with a inside straight, to use a poker term. 75,000 votes in 5 counties. Now, she talks all the time that she won 2.8 million, 3 million. Hey, it's a difference in golf between match play and medal play. If we had to play medal play, we would have gone to California's other states and beaten her on popular vote. It's not a popular vote. It's an electoral college vote. And she was too arrogant and too disdainful of really the backbone of the Democratic Party to go even have the common courtesy to talk to them. We went there every day. Remember, I think we were 3-1 in counties that had the highest combat death ratios. I think we outpolled them. Polled them at the end 3-1 because we put the message where the people that needed to hear it and know that you've been dialed out forever, but now you're going to have a voice in the room, and that voice is going to be Donald Trump. Let's cut to the third week of January 2017. There's 2 speeches given, historic speeches. On Wednesday in Davos, my favorite town, right? Davos man. Have you seen these goofballs? Look, I was at Goldman Sachs, okay? I was in the M&A department at Goldman Sachs. These guys are the same collection of clowns. They go to all these conferences and know everything, and they're, Davos man. They're gonna solve all the world's problems, right? If you gave me the choice of how my country was going to be governed, I would take the first 100 people that showed up here tonight versus the first 100 people that showed up at Davos. More grit, determination, common sense, understanding of humanity, right? You don't have to go to Harvard and Oxford and all these places. Look, I went to Harvard. I graduated with honors. It ain't that great, okay? My grandfather went to the 3rd grade. He had more common sense, understood more things than all these guys. Davos, man, it's a complete sham. At Davos, Xi shows up, President Xi. Remember, he gives that speech, the Save Globalization. The Economist, the Financial Times, all of them. He is the hero. He's the hero that's going to save globalization. In fact, he specifically puts all the problems in the world are on these populists and these nationalists, right? They're screwing up the system. System's got to be more globalized. And she is going to lead us to a great new dawning future. Look, the consulting firms, the accounting firms, the law firms, the investment banks, they all trade in one thing, that's information. They're plenty smart. They know about the gulags, okay? They know about the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhists. They know about the evangelical Christians and the Catholics. They know the gulag that Xi and Washi Shan run as a surveillance state on their own people. There's not a finer group of people in the world than the Chinese people. 1.4 billion people, 90 million members of the Communist Party. The 1.3 whatever billion don't own any property, no land. They own no stock. They own no assets. It's a totalitarian dictatorship as bad or worse as anything we saw in the 1930s. And Davos man knows that. So why is this guy held up as an all-conquering hero? You know why? Money. That's what they worship at Davos, money. They have zero moral authority to dictate to populists and nationalists and sovereignty anything. And the reason I love the kids across the street, and the reason I go to Bergen and places like that and do these media conferences time and time again, is because when they fully understand that they're being played, they're going to be on our side. Two days later, Trump gives the American Carnage speech. Oh my Lord, to see a meltdown. We kind of knew when we were helping President Trump write it, it would be a meltdown, right? Mainstream media, what had gotten so wrong the Trump campaign, and if you look at their Twitter feeds, they're all talking to each other, trying to break stories on Trump, right? New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, ABC, NBC, all of them. Huffington Post, some of Fox, right? Just like in the financial crisis, nobody's held accountable. In the mainstream media, they're all about transparency. They're all about accountability. You know, we're here, they want to hold people accountable. Not one person fired. Show me an editor that's fired. Show me a producer that's fired. Show me a reporter that was fired for the biggest miss in media history. Show me one. Because there's not. That's the system. Trump gives American Carnage, and we walk through exactly what's happened to the country. This speech is about the Westphalian system. It's about the nation state. It's done in juxtaposition to Brother Xi. Because just like the EU, Xi doesn't want nation states. What they want is administrative units, right? They have a whole central plan, one belt, one road, made in China 2025, 5G rollout, this whole thing. I'll get into a little more detail in a minute. But it's essentially to turn everybody into a source of raw material, a market for end product, and maybe every now and again you will make some component parts for their advanced manufacturing system. And you'll be a nice administrative unit. That's the global system. That's what the EU is. The EU wants Italy to be South Carolina to France's North Carolina. The United States of Europe has been the driving concept of the Jean Monnet and now Macron faction for years. They're up front about it. Macron just did the Renaissance paper. He talks about it. More integration, more foreign policy integration. Now he wants his own army. That's going to go over well. I know a lot of Italian mothers are going to sign up to have their sons and daughters with French and German officers. The world just doesn't work like that. I'm not picking on the French and German. The French and German mother's not going to sign up to have it under Italian officers. Life just doesn't move like that. But the meltdown on American Carnage was spectacular. Those two speeches lay it all out. These are two conflicting systems that are now on a collision course. Washington, D.C. today with this trade deal. It's not a trade deal. This is a truce in an economic war. The ballots you guys are going to cast in the European election. The reason, remember, all the mainstream media, all of a sudden, democracy's not working. Democracy's not working. You know what's not working? Because they're losing elections. right? It's working fine when they're winning. Now they're losing. This is illiberal. And that's how we're going to beat them. We're going to beat them at the ballot box. History's on our side. The momentum's on our side. That's what's driving them nuts. That's why they got to have more identity politics. That's what I keep saying. When they start calling you a racist, when they start calling you a homophobe, when they start calling you a nativist, a xenophobe, a Islamophobe, all the concepts, right? Wear those accusations as a badge of honor. Because those accusations show they got nothing. They're never going to debate you on the facts. I'm living experience of that. I take over the campaign on a Saturday night, I think the 13th. Hillary Clinton's been on the beach, sunning. She's 12 or 14 points up. Why campaign? Let Trump just implode. She comes off the beach after a couple of days. We start tightening up some numbers. She comes off the beach in Reno. She gives her first speech in 3 weeks since the convention. It's on Breitbart, Bannon, the alt-right, white supremacy, white nationalism. I'm sitting in the control room. We got all the TVs. I got all the young people. And I just say, I said, nobody knows who Steve Bannon is, and they don't care. Lady, you're running to be commander-in-chief of the most powerful military force in world history, and you're talking about Breitbart. People around the country have to go, what is she doing? Remember, Trump had never been to Breitbart. They used to print every now and again some stories out, but he'd never been to the site. I told people right then, I said, hey, we focus on Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. Actually, Trump said Minnesota. I waved off on that. My mistake. We only lost by 1 point. Pennsylvania. On economic nationalism. Remember, economic nationalism doesn't care about your ethnicity, doesn't care about your race, doesn't care about your religion, doesn't care how tall you are, what your size, shape you are, what your gender is, doesn't care about your sexual preference. It doesn't care about any of that. It cares about one thing. You're a citizen. Because as a citizen, you should get a special, better deal, not a worse deal. That's what the globalists have done. They've kind of flipped the thing upside down because they benefit from the system as it goes today. Two things happened off those speeches. One was the nullification project. This is the opposition party media, and I was the one that I'm proud to say came up with that name. Opposition party media, kind of the Democratic left a little bit. But this thing called the resistance, and you saw it in also the corporatist and the city of London and Wall Street. The Wall Street crowd faction fought Trump every day, right? Particularly in his trade policies. The nullification project was to delegitimize him as president about his election. So we had the Russian hoax for 2 years, of which President Trump said, I'm waiving executive privilege. I'm going to send all you guys up there. If you're at the port, I'm the one saying, hey, don't fire Comey. I think that's dumb. You can fire Comey. You got the rights to do that, but you shouldn't do it. But on the investigation, I said, why are we waiving executive privilege? You've got, these are all privileges between the executive thing. No need to do that. Nope. He says, I want to get it all out there. 1.5 million documents, 500 witnesses, 2,200 subpoenas, everything. For what? Read the report. Nothing. Zero. But the mainstream media, every night, 3 things in the New York Times, CNN, all night long. If the New York Times didn't publish in the morning those stories, CNN would be a test pattern, right? Got to go off the paper record. So this resistance, and by the way, it happened twofold in the city of London with Brexit and in D.C. with Donald Trump. Why is that? Do you honestly think because you win an election, they're going to pat you on the head and say, hey, that's great. Here are the keys. Go do what you want. No, they are not, okay? They are not. You're going to have to win election after election after election. No one election. They're good markers along the highway, but you have to keep winning. This is a process. So you had the nullification process, which 3 years into it, there's no Brexit. Heck, Nigel's created a new party, right? The Brexit Party, right? He add Labour and the Tories up together, don't match him. So they stopped Brexit in its tracks, right? Took away legitimate vote of the British people. And they're trying to impeach Trump. And I tip my hat to them because I like a good fight. They did what the Tea Party did in 2018. They focused on one thing, Donald Trump. They believe the progressive left and the opposition party media believe something the Republican establishment doesn't. They believe that Trump's a transformative figure and a historic president. And he's going to be in their lives 10, 20, and 30 years from now from two things, deconstruction of the administrative state and the judiciary. And the progressive left did what you have to do today to win. They mobilized. They went door to door, and it was a big defeat. 52-46 if you aggregate up the House vote, and I think it's 7 million votes. It's a forerunner to 20. You have to mobilize your base. And they all whine every day, democracy, Trump's so divisive, democracy's terrible. It's all. I said 113 million people voted in an off-year election. Biggest number we've ever had. So we had the nullification project. We had had this resistance to Trump and to Brexit. But look at the wins we had. After the historic, quite frankly, big defeat of Macron defeating Le Pen, in the summer of 2017, it looked bad. Salvini was at about 5 or 6%, I think, the Northern League. Bolsonaro was at 5%. Nigel Farage was out of the business. He was gone. Okay? Vox was at 0.0. And Le Pen had basically the huge contention about, hey, should you just throw Front National under the bus and start a new party? That's the summer of 2017. With Macron, remember, as soon as Macron won, every cover, the same magazines that had done The Economist, the Financial Times, all of them, populism's over. It's dead. Macron's the great savior of the globalist system. And look at what we've done since then. Salvini's huge victory in February of 2018. Orban again in June, right? Le Pen now in the European parliamentary elections is polling above Macron. Vox just got 10% in a national election, and brother Nigel Farage created a party 3 weeks ago and is polling at 27%, right? Make sure you understand something. This is all with no money and no media platforms. Salvini won with Facebook Live. Bolsonaro won with Facebook Live. These campaigns took a couple of $1 million. But it is grit and determination and a message. And when people understand that message, and they understand that message is not racist, it's not nativist, it's not homophobic, right? It's about working class people and middle class people. They're finally saying enough's enough. This European parliamentary election, when I go around and talk to people, I say, hey, outside of England, they're all Eurosceptics, but they don't want to break up the EU. They kind of want to do what the very wise men and women in Norway did back in the early 90s. If you go back and look at those debates, it's the same debate that's going on today in May of 19. It's all about sovereignty. The big thing was that if we vote ourselves, we're already in the common market, we got the economic deal, but if you vote ourselves into the political deal, we're going to give up the sovereignty of our country, and we may give up the sovereignty we have as citizens to control these politicians, to a bunch of unelected, nameless, faceless bureaucrats in Brussels. The debate was very intense, and I think it was 52-48. For the second time, you voted not to join. And the wisdom of that, and if you go back and look at the debates, it's the same debate today. They're not trying to break up and destroy the EU. They're saying we don't want Macron's United States of Europe. We want a Europe of nations. We want Hungary to be Hungary, France to be France, Italy to be Italy. We all have unique problems and issues in our country, and we're proud of our countries. People say, Bannon, why are you running around Europe? I'm running around Europe. I come from a blue-collar family. Front National, the Swiss People Party, asked me to come over, and I said, what do you want me to talk about? And they said, just tell us we're not alone. Well, you're not alone. I've been all throughout Asia, Latin America, Europe, the United States. We are the majority. We just have to mobilize our vote, and we have to get candidates out that understand that and hold them